Candor, transparency, reality. The world is starving for one simple thing: truth. I've worked in politics for nearly 20 years, and if there's one thing that this industry lacks, it's truth. Many of the biggest names in politics rose to power through dishonesty, exaggeration, and just outright lies. And what happens to those who proclaim the truth? They're ridiculed as conspiracy theorists, they're slandered as racists or Nazis, they're fired or they're punished. Why? Because lies are weak and truth is strong. A regime built on lies cannot withstand even the most basic truths. So they make examples of those bold enough to declare that the emperor has no clothes. Our guest today is fearless and above all, determined. Determined to keep fighting for truth in every way he can. And it's my great honor to welcome to episode 5, former Marine and best-selling author, Mark Geist. Mark, welcome to the Terry Schilling Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Terry. Honor to be here.
Well, I'm honored to have you. I'm very excited to get going and to have this conversation with you. We have a lot to discuss. You know, obviously, I want to dig into Benghazi a little bit more later, but you're known for that. That's really how you kind of exploded on the scene because of your heroism there. But tell us a little bit more, because we have an interesting audience. They're mostly socially conservative, a lot of war room posse people. But tell our audience just a little bit more about you so they understand just, more of who you are as a human being and what you're really focused on.
I grew up in southeastern Colorado, farming and ranching. My grandfather was my hero. He was a World War II veteran. And I never really knew much about what he did other than he served in World War II until after he passed away. He had given me, the one thing that he gave me, because I was the only grandson that joined the military, he gave me a shadow box. And when I started going through that, it was pretty amazing. He has 5 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars. He had the North Africa Campaign Medal, and he also had the German Occupation Medal. So it's, he was like there from the very first fight to the very last fight. And I started looking at that after I got injured in Benghazi and started thinking about it. There's a good possibility that we trekked through some of the same sand, because some of those battles that were fought in North Africa were in the area of Libya. That's kind of, he was, like I said, he was my hero. I had 3 uncles that served during Vietnam, 2 in the Navy, 1 in the Marine Corps, and that was probably what was instrumental in sending me into the Marine Corps, or me joining the Marine Corps. I joined that and was in the infantry. Worked as a counterterrorism, anti-terrorism instructor, and then finished out my career. My last 5 or 6 years, I was an interrogator translator. I don't speak it now very well, but I used to speak Persian Farsi very well. I could read it and write it. But I got out. I was deploying a lot, so I got out of the Marine Corps and I went into law enforcement. Served as a deputy sheriff. And there, it was probably one of the most satisfying jobs I had, but most difficult was the Lord blessed me with the ability to get kids to tell me things they should never have to tell anybody. Mm-hmm. And I was certified as a forensic interviewer of children who have been trafficked, who have been sexually abused, and all of that kind of thing. And but helping them was a huge. Was huge in my heart, and I left there to take a job as chief of police in a small town near where I grew up. I loved that. It was a whole different aspect of law enforcement. Not a lot of crime, but a lot of people that needed help, and a lot of elderly people, small town. People aren't coming back to it. The kids aren't, and a lot of lonely adults or grandparents out there that just didn't have anybody. So it was just kind of another very satisfying way of serving the public. But then when 9/11 hit, I knew I had to get back into things. So I ended up, after trying to get back in and getting over to the war, I finally was able to through private military contracting. And I started that in early 2004, and did that all the way up until I got injured in Benghazi in 2012.
Holy cow. I mean, the working with children and sex trafficking is so dark. And I think it's so dark that a lot of people just turn a blind eye to it, or they just can't pay attention to it. And so anytime I hear about people that are working on this issue or working with these kids, my heart just goes out to them, because you guys, you're doing the Lord's work. I mean, this is the stuff that most people aren't even willing to do.
Well, Jesus Christ gave us a command, and that was to take care of our children. So when you're called to do that, you just got to do it.
Yep. Christ is King, Christ is Lord, and that's
Amen.
right. We need to return to that for sure. And then the other thing that's interesting is, as you were talking about your family history with the military, it's so obvious that, the military is a family tradition. It's your dad serving, it's his dad serving, and then you serve. And how do you think that relates to the recruitment shortages under the Biden administration? Or do you think that this was grandparents and fathers basically saying, no, you cannot go into the military? I mean, it's a big deal to break that chain. And it was I think recruitment was down by 25%, which is egregious under the Biden administration.
Yeah, and a lot of it, from what I've seen, is a lot of times, because it wasn't, my dad didn't serve, but it was my uncles and my grandfather. And I think sometimes it skips a generation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because especially those that, the Vietnam War, a lot of Americans saw a lot of horrendous things and didn't want their kids. Well, then the kids are looking to the grandparents, and the grandparents were their heroes. And I think one of the things that has caused our problems, I mean, and so many problems here in America, is lack of fathers in the home. Mm-hmm. Because there's no one there to teach them how to be strong, Christ following young men. And without that, that's what we are supposed to be, as a strong family unit. And, the devil, the enemy, is going after that, and we are allowing him to win right now. And I think we need to change that.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of our problems are rooted in daddy issues, right? In these kids that don't have dads around or have had abusive fathers or whatever, which will, and we're going to get into that later in the show, and how we can help these families and help these guys recover. We got to talk about Benghazi. I mean, I know it was over 10 years ago, but these problems are still haunting America, it feels like, especially in light of Afghanistan. Rob, can you play clip A, please?
Tuesday night at the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, a complex and highly dangerous situation. Outside, an anti-American protest. Then, a group of heavily armed militants, approximately 24 of them, launched an attack firing rocket-propelled grenades.
The attack in Libya appears to be a very coordinated military-style attack. This was not a demonstration gone bad. This was a clear, targeted, planned event.
According to senior U.S. officials, that ignited a fire inside the consulate. American and Libyan security personnel, officials say, were forced to fight on two fronts. The attackers on the outside, the fire inside.
So, Mark, I'll just say this for our audience. You're an absolute hero. You were on the ground there. Obviously, this was a horrific ordeal in what the people on the ground went through. But I think that the cover-up and the misinformation might have been just as bad, maybe even worse. Can you talk about your experience? And then I also want to just hear from you how you feel about the changes, if any, that the U.S. government has made to avoid these in the future. Do you think we're on the right track? So what was your experience like, just for the audience? And then have we learned our lesson, I guess?
Well, to make it clear, is I worked as a private military contractor for the CIA. My job was to make sure that those that I was protecting, the American spies were the ones that we were protecting, that they came home safe. We were in another compound that was about three-quarters of a mile to a mile away from where the consulate was. The consulates is what we saw where the fires burned, where they were, where the Ambassador Stevens and his information officer Sean Smith perished, due to lack of oxygen inside of those fires. And, it was horrendous over there. the information we had on the ground was there was over 40 armed individuals that had taken over that compound. And I myself, I was out in town with a female case officer meeting with some people when we got the call to get back to the annex. And by the time we got back to the annex, the rest of the team had moved over after being told to stand down 3 times. They went over and were able to push off 40 armed insurgents, take the pressure off the security team from the State Department. They came out and started searching for the ambassador and Sean Smith. Found Sean Smith relatively soon, but couldn't find the ambassador. Tig, who was one of my teammates, another Marine veteran, and Tyrone Woods, who was a Navy SEAL veteran, went in and out of that building looking for the ambassador and couldn't find him, unfortunately. And they ended up getting a counterattack. They repelled that assault and then ended up getting information that more than 100 individuals were heading their way to come back and attack again. So they had to make the decision to either stay there and defend an indefensible position or fall back to the annex and reposition ourselves and get ready to defend what we thought and knew was going to come that way afterwards.
It's absolutely insane. And I can't, I mean, it's so tough. I mean, we have such a great country that this stuff doesn't happen here, right? And we often forget that these things happen almost every day in certain parts of the world. I'm wondering, can you, the thing that gets me, you talked about Christianity, how it was under attack in America and we're just doing our godly duty here. But the thing that was interesting to me is that when they try to cover this thing up and misdirect people for the causes of it, didn't they claim that it was an anti-Islam viral video that went out that sparked this? And then there was actually, no evidence that was the case?
Well, there was no evidence that was the case in Benghazi, Libya. What really happened is if you go back and look and do some research, you'll find that there was earlier that day on September 11th, there were protests in Cairo regarding that video. It was all orchestrated by the bad guys that were wanting just to raise Cain in Cairo. They started throwing Molotov cocktails over the wall. So I think that when it happened in Benghazi later that night, which was around 9:30, 9:50, somewhere in there, when the attack occurred, it was easy for the administration just to try to use what was going on in Cairo earlier to mask and cover up what happened in Benghazi.
Why do you think they did that? Do you think they were trying to stoke like more anti-Christian fervor, or do you think they were just trying to, just cover CYA,
I mean, I think there's a couple different reasons. One, I think, what they were doing there in Benghazi and some of that stuff, what was going on. And then the other one is it was a matter of convenience. And, I think that Hillary Clinton was at that time, and this is just my opinion, that she already knew she was going to try to run for president in 2016. And what she wanted to do was put together a coalition of forces. And this is what really happened in 2011. She put together that coalition of forces that overthrew Gaddafi, when in reality, Gaddafi was doing what we wanted him to do. He was going after the bad guys in Eastern Libya. Unfortunately, he did it the way that he always did things, in an over-exuberant way. And administrations changed from Bush to Obama. And I think Hillary Clinton saw an opening where she could show her foreign statesmanship, or lack thereof, by putting together a coalition to overthrow the bad guy that was Gaddafi.
It's amazing to me how careless these guys, or at least, I mean, maybe they're very deliberate, right? Which might make it actually worse. But how careless these elected officials and these people in power in America can be with things that can actually lead to serious devastation and massive amounts of death. Tucker Carlson did this interview a few years ago, and he gave an answer about this aspect of leadership. He said, I don't think I could ever run for office or be, elected official or ruler, because part of what rulers have to do is decide who lives and who dies, for the best thing in their country. And that's a heavy weight to bear. But it's amazing how carefree and reckless these guys are with human lives.
Well, and it is, for me personally, I can say that, serving my country and dying for it, that's what I chose to do. And it's not if you're going to get injured, it's when you're going to get injured if you do it long enough. But when they do it for self-serving reasons that don't advance the mission of the United States and the freedoms that we try to take in other countries, that's the problem I have with it, is when they're lying about stuff, and technology this day and age is really, as good as it's helped us, there's a lot of stuff I think that, where it hinders us, because, they can see real time what's going on in Washington, D.C., and then they start trying to make decisions there instead of giving the information to the ground or letting the ground troops do that. I mean, and that's one of the key things in leadership is delegating your authority and training your people to know and do what your mission is and trusting in them to do that. Because the Americans that I work with, they're there for the same reason I am, because they love this country,
right? Because
they want to keep the American people strong, and they want to defend what has been defended over generations. And like right now, it's been 250 years that we've been in existence, and we are all proud to be a part of that history and that honor to serve something so great.
Well, I want to, you were mentioning self-serving leaders and military incompetence and these guys making all types of mistakes. It's a perfect lead-in to the Afghanistan withdrawal. We produced this documentary last year. We started off wanting to make campaign ads where we tell the stories of the Gold Star families from the Afghanistan withdrawal. But the thing is, Mark, the stories were so horrific and gut-wrenching, and they were so detailed. We wanted to make this whole thing into a movie to help educate Americans about exactly what went wrong. And it was like a rabbit trail that just never, ever ended. We found all these connections to all the woke policies that Biden was pushing in the military. I mean, starting with DEI, which was so harmful, but it seems innocuous. But we kept going. Rob, can we play clip B, please?
There is no more special time for a soldier's family than when he finally comes home. And those soldiers, those Marines, didn't come home alive. And President Biden was checking his watch, probably because he had so many caskets to receive. He had 13 caskets to receive, which happened at the height of the Iraq War in times, but it had been a while since we had a ramp ceremony with over 13 caskets to come off the plane. He didn't have time for them, even though the nature of that withdrawal was his order, even though there is no other decision he makes that puts Americans in harm's way than those relating to military affairs overseas. He didn't have time for them. And that's what Americans should see, is that President Biden doesn't have time for his most solemn duty to the men and women who put their lives on the line.
So, Mark, that was the clip, when we were doing the show prep, that was the clip that really hit me because of the fact that he doesn't know how many more, he's basically checking his clock to see, how many more of these do we have? He was so out of it, so incompetent that he's checking his watch, which is incredibly rude at this incredibly solemn ceremony. It's not just solemn, it's sacred, right? And what message does this send to those families?
Well, it's the whole thing regarding the Biden administration as a whole and his mental decline that occurred in front of Americans, in front of the American citizens, and they could see it. But the staff around them, around President Biden, failed to be truthful, failed to come out and do what was right at that time. And That's why the leadership that failed him in advising him on how to handle Afghanistan, we shouldn't have. And I mean, I know people who presented what should happen, and we shouldn't have never went to zero personnel. It was ridiculous. We should have never tried to do a NEO, which is an evacuation of non-essential personnel from the international airport in Kabul. You had the most defensible piece of property controlled by the U.S., which was Bagram Air Base. And that one, I mean, you go back in history, you look at where the Russians came in and left from. That was Bagram Air Base. You go all the way back to Alexander the Great and look where he staged his armies before he went into India. And that was in that same territory as Bagram Air Base, because everyone knows that's the most defensible piece of property there. And if we have 3- and 4-star generals that were advising any other way, they have failed to read history, and they have failed the service members that they lead. And it ends in something like Abbey Gate. It ends in the thousands, tens of thousands of Allied troops from Afghanistan that fought beside us, that helped us take back that country and give the rights to the people and give the rights to the females, who immediately after we pulled out was all just completely gone and back to the way it was 20 years earlier when we started.
Yeah, it's incredible how much of a disaster it is, and it's incredible how callous he was. I mean, in some of we talked to a lot of these families throughout the whole year in 2024, even before that. And the thing that stuck out to me was they always brought up in their public speeches when we would do events with them is Joe Biden never called us back. He never got in touch with us. He never called us to thank us for our son and daughter's sacrifice. It's just gut-wrenching, you know?
Well, it is. It is so bad that a sitting president at the time could not do that and was not allowed to. And it was because of his mental faculties. He, not to make an excuse for it, because there's no excuse for it. He should have, and the people around him should have as well. And that identify what the problem was and get rid of the problem.
Well, no, I think that's actually kind of fair, because I'm the president of just a small organization in DC, and I rely so much on my staff. I would miss a lot of things if it wasn't for my staff pointing out things to me. So I do think that's a fair point. But I'm wondering, do you see, because I think I read in the show prep that you were helpful in helping evacuate, I think, 100 people from Kabul?
Yeah, we were able to help get people out of Kabul. We established a safe house in Pakistan and was able to get a lot of several ladies. They were reporters that were for women's rights, get them out of the country. And we very instrumental in that, and it was an honor and a blessing to be able to have those connections to be able to do that, and help save lives. That's what our it doesn't matter if you're Christian, Muslim, whatever. The Lord commands us to love our enemies as He loves us, and if He's willing to forgive me for anything and everything I've done, then how can I hold anything against even my enemies? Because they are doing what they think is right. And if I do it better, then I win. And, if that's the Lord's purpose, that's the Lord's purpose.
Do you see any parallels between Benghazi and the Afghanistan withdrawal?
Yeah, it's leadership and lack of. It's lack of leadership that at the civilian level, from president to State Department and all that staff, all the administration staff for them, as in both Benghazi and Libya, and the military personnel. There was only one person that really stood up, and the general in charge of AFRICOM stood up to do the right thing, and he ended up getting relieved of command.
I just think it's interesting your take on this, because you're probably one of very few people that was there for both of these events essentially, and so I just think it matters a lot more. But it's obvious, I think to everyone now that Biden essentially changed the entire mission of the military completely from all the previous administrations. Rob, can we play clips C and D, please?
The progressives have taken over our educational system, that this is a fundamentally bad country. You don't want to necessarily go die for that. What family of color, when we go back to recruiting, would then want their son or daughter joining a military that the first African-American Secretary of Defense sent the message to the whole country is overrun with white extremists? I think that message from him was incredibly damaging. Our most significant advantage against the Chinese right now is our submarine fleet, because that can get under the water under their barrage of missiles that'll be coming after our aircraft carriers. You know what? 40% of our submarines are so broken they can't leave the repair docks. Those are the kinds of issues that Secretary of Defense should be focused on.
We had military families complain about drag queen story hours occurring on military bases during the daytime for children. Like, of all the things that should be happening on a military base for family and morale and welfare, the notion that you're doing drag queen shows for kids on military bases, it shows how much we've lost the plot here and lost the critical objective that the military ought to be focused on.
So Mark, like the thing that kills me about all this stuff, I mean, one, it's obvious how ridiculous and inappropriate and harmful this is to push this type of weird agenda on kids. But, from my standpoint, the military seems very straightforward. We just want good, honest guys who love their country, who are brave enough to go to the front lines and fight so that we don't get enslaved and all of us killed by our enemies. I mean, I think a lot of Americans don't realize just how many people in the world would enslave us all and kill us all and and actually probably feel better about themselves as if they were stronger. But I want to ask you, what is with this push? What is with the push to wokeify our military, to weaken it like that? But also, there's this agenda where we're teaching our kids that America is the evil empire, right? Like, that was how Ronald Reagan talked about our arch enemy, our rival, the Soviet Empire. But these people in the military and in our schools today, they talk about America as if we're the evil empire. Is your take that these are well-meaning, useful idiots who are just doing the bidding of our enemies, or is there something else going on here?
No, I think, we get down to it because I get this question asked, how do we fix this? How do we fix what's going on in this country? And I think we're on the right track right now because we have the right leader in place. And one of the biggest reasons is his love of the Lord. President Trump, just like all of us, has never been perfect, but he's always had a foundation of love for the Lord, and we've seen that. And I think it was reinforced even more in that field in Pennsylvania when he did get shot, but almost killed. That changes the way you look at things, and we're facing a demonic overtaking of this country
100% demonic, 100%.
Because you look at what's going on. I mean, they're wanting to sacrifice our kids. They allowed 360,000 kids to cross the border and not even keep account of them. And why? Because they are being trafficked in so many ways. And that's another thing that's near and dear to my heart, that is to go out and find them, locate them, and then get them into someplace safe, because we have that responsibility as a nation. Even though the Biden administration, they screwed it up. They tried to infiltrate us to bring about whatever end they want, which was basically the end of America, because without America, the rest of the world's easy to take over.
Yes, that's right. One of the most horrifying things that I think we're just learning now is that under Biden, they stopped doing any bit of genetic testing to ensure that these kids coming over the border actually belong to the people claiming to be their parents.
Exactly.
Horrific.
Well, we know that a lot of what was happening is families in Mexico and Nicaragua, El Salvador, Colombia, they would sell their kids to the cartels. The cartels would take them kids, and when a couple would show up at the border and they didn't have a child, if they crossed and got caught, they were going to be held until their hearing. If they had a child with them, then they would not get put into detention facility. They would be given a court date and told to return for that. And so these kids were
returned. I'm sure they returned on time and
right. Well, not only did they not return, what they did is they would rent a kid, cross the border. Once they got across the border and took off, the kid would get picked up by the coyotes again, move back across the border, and get re-trafficked again. It's absolutely ridiculous to see that the previous administration had allowed that to go. Because I can guarantee you, if I know it as Joe Blow, civilian, then that everybody in the administration knew that it was going on.
The emperor has no clothes. We all know it, right? We all know it. So one thing I want to get into, I just want to tap into this quickly because I really want to get into the families issue with the military. So I just saw this stat on Fox News the other day from the Media Research Center, really great organization here. They track all the media coverage, who gets positive coverage, who gets negative coverage. Pete Hegseth, they went through all the Trump administration. It's all egregious. It's like 89% negative coverage for RFK Jr., 94% negative coverage for Elon Musk. But Pete Hegseth had literally, I'm not kidding you, 100% negative coverage. And then meanwhile, you have his predecessor, Lloyd Austin, who was an abject nightmare. I mean, I don't think we've ever had a more disastrous Secretary of State than Lloyd Austin. He literally went AWOL and never told anyone where he's going. What do you think? I mean, first of all, what's your take on Hegseth? Because I love the guy. I love everything he's saying. He's showing his jacket. It's the American flag. He obviously loves his country. He is, I think, one of the grunts that rose up through the ranks and is now in charge. But what's your take? I mean, you're former military. What's your take on Pete Hegseth and what should we be doing more besides just praying for this guy to support him?
I think everybody in America needs to be praying for him because of the demonic attacks that come towards him that are hitting him every day. I guarantee, and it's coming through the people, coming through the press. I think this is a man that loves his country. I think that he wants to do what's best for the country as he sees it. And what he sees is what I guarantee you 75 to 80% of the American people see the exact same thing. They just are afraid to say it because they don't want to get attacked themselves. And what it is he loves his country. He thinks we should be strong, that men are men, and that's the way it is, that we should be protecting women's rights by keeping men out of women's sports.
Yes.
At a minimum, there should only be 3 classifications of sports: male, female, and co-ed. That's the way it should be. We should be, he wants to go after trafficking. He wants to go after, the military stopping funding any sex changes for children under the age of 17 or under. All of that is the doing of the devil and the far left that is really trying to do that. And I think Pete Hegseth is the right guy to be in the position that he is for the time that we're in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Look, you work in this area, you know a lot about it, but the issue of military families. So, look, my dad was a one-term member of Congress, and he really dug into the veterans issue and making sure that veterans in our district got the right care. But, we definitely don't give enough time and attention to our veterans at all. I mean, but even when we do think about our soldiers, it's the families that get left behind, right? And they get forgotten. And obviously the family, we all say this all the time because it's true, but I think we take it for granted sometimes, is the family's the bedrock of society. Well, if that's true, then it's also the bedrock of the military, and it's the bedrock of our soldiers. So talk to us a little bit about, actually, Rob, can you pull up image D, please? We have some stats on military families. Relationship in the military. Yeah, so if you guys pull this up, you can see there's serious problems. So, Mark, can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on your end, and then just any work or, just let's unpack this a little bit more.
Well, and it's awesome that you bring this up because, tomorrow is May 1st, and we're starting into May, which is the Military Caregiver Month. And May 9th specific is the Military Spouses Day. And we need to recognize the spouses out there and all they do for us. I mean, I deployed over a 9-year period. I deployed 22 times. I left my family and came home. Every time I left, it was a trauma. It was difficult on my family. They didn't know if I was coming back or not. Then when I did, I'm carrying some of the stuff that I couldn't leave everything where I came from, and you bring it home, and they put aside their problems and their trauma of taking care of the kids, of being both the father and the mother while we're gone. They put away that pain and that trauma that they had to go ahead and help us heal and recover and be the better people that we can be. They are, to me, our spouses, and I will say significant others as well, because, not all of us get married when we can, and a lot of it's because we're deployed so much. But there's somebody there that comes home that loves us, and they're the true heroes. Mm-hmm. We're going to do work that we chose to do. They signed up not for that. They signed up to be our spouses, and because of us deciding to go do what we do, a lot of times we drag them into it. And I can say nothing but kudos to every spouse out there. And it's so important that we recognize them and take care of them.
No, that's right. They do get forgotten, and these spouses, I mean, they put up with a lot. They sacrifice a lot. I do feel like, just in general, moms get left behind and forgotten about and just taken for granted, just because they're so dependable, right? They're always there 24/7, at least if you got a good one, and most of us do have good ones. Can we pull up image E and F, please, Rob? So these are some stats on PTSD and marriages, and also PTSD and spouses. Mark, I'll tell you, my dad was a member of Congress, as I mentioned, and we were shocked at how just dysfunctional the VA was. But my dad wasn't just a member of Congress, he's also a recovering alcoholic, and he was in the program. And one thing that was really helpful for my family and beneficial was the Al-Anon, which a lot of people don't know this unless you have a family member in recovery. It's a program for the family members. So it's not alcoholics, but it's the family members of alcoholics, and it's a support group for them. I'm wondering, are there any groups like this for spouses who have members of their family with PTSD, or would this be a good idea to explore?
It's ironic that you bring that up. My wife, I have a nonprofit called Shadow Warriors Project, and that is one of the big areas that my wife has been passionate about, and the Lord's put on her heart to start doing and helping. And she does a spousal retreat, and it's usually 4 or 5 days long, but it's all geared towards teaching the spouse about how to deal with the PTSD and the traumatic brain injuries of the veteran. But more than anything, it's to honor them, bless them, bring them to Christ, and it is to give them the tools to take care of their own trauma, and to show them and build the community for them. Because my wife will tell me every day when she's talking to these ladies that call that the big thing they're looking for is community, that other people that can understand what they're going through and what they've been through. And it's phenomenal that you bring that up, and thank you for that. But our website is shadowwarriorsproject.org, and the program is Her Warrior Heart, because our spouses are warriors just like we are. They're just fighting a different battle on a different battlefield.
No, and that's right. They're good people. They're just hurting. I mean, they've seen some horrific things. They've actually seen things that we were not ever meant to see.
Right.
Things that human beings, that God never ever wanted us to experience or see. And it always happens to the people they're closest with, like literally the people that they're in foxholes with and fighting together. That's a sacred bond. And well, thank you for doing that. And by the way, I'd love to have your wife to come on a later episode to talk about that and unpack that more. It's incredibly important. Mark, we've got to wrap up. I could talk to you for forever. So I want people to know where to find you, because your story has to get out there, your work has to get out there. What's the best way for people to follow you and your work and keep in touch with you?
My website is www.markgeist.com. You can find me there. I'm across most social medias, at least the big ones: X, Facebook, Insta. That's the LinkedIn. got a YouTube, a small YouTube channel. And I also, at shadowwarriorsproject.org is another great place to find me and what I do and what we've done. Shadow Warriors was started to help our private military contractors because most of them don't have the support medically like they do in the military. And so we started with that after I got injured. It was my way of taking care of guys. We do a lot of stuff with canines. We have a canine therapy course where we bring veterans in. We introduce them to Christ. We use dogs to show them how to manage their anxiety and their stress. It's a great time. And again, it's telling your story. It's getting that out. And that's the same with the caregivers or with the spouses, is letting them tell their story and understanding and having that compassionate ear. Because a lot of us, we don't do that anymore at the kitchen table, talk about what happens. We don't talk about our lives, and we need to. Everything we do is in threes because it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Yes, sir. Mark, I love you, man. Thank you for everything you're doing. This is fantastic. Definitely want to get you back on. But God bless you, brother. I'm sure we'll meet again, and we'll be talking soon. But thank you. Thank you for everything, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Terry. God bless. Keep up the great work.
God bless you, brother.